Good evening. For those who are just joining us, we're getting ready to begin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erica Hilton, and I'm with Advancement Project National Office. Welcome to Where Do We Go From Here? Racial Healing 2021 panel discussion. Tonight's panel is being held to mark the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's 5th Annual National Day of Racial Healing, a day dedicated to actions that acknowledge and help repair the deep damage done by racism in America. I am honored to introduce you to the person who will lead tonight's discussion, Pastor William H. Lamar IV. Pastor Lamar is the pastor of Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. Previously, he was managing director of leadership education at Duke University Divinity School and has served congregations in Hyattsville, Maryland, Monticello, Florida, Orlando, Florida, and Jacksonville, Florida. Pastor Lamar is extending the ancestral legacy of worship, liberation, and service that has animated Metropolitan AME Church for nearly 2 centuries. Thank you, Pastor Lamar, for leading tonight's discussion.
And thank you, Dr. Hilton, and I am extraordinarily honored to moderate this panel with such luminaries, and we look forward to a rich discussion and dialogue, which will help us to build the kind of society that we know is possible. Please allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. First, we have Judith Browne Dianis. Judith is the Executive Director of the Advancement Project National Office, where she leads the organization in combating structural racism in voting, policing, criminal justice, and immigration. She is a voting rights expert and pioneer in the movement to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. President Derrick Johnson is the president and CEO of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Under his leadership, the NAACP has re-envisioned and reinvigorated its work to secure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights for all people and to eliminate race-based discrimination. President Fawn R. Sharp is the president of the National Congress of American Indians, the oldest, largest, and most representative American Indian and Alaska Native tribal government organization in the country. President Sharp is also the current president of the Quinault Indian Nation in Tuhola, Washington. Janet Murguía. Janet is president and CEO of Unidos US, the largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization in the nation. Since 2005, Janet has been leading the organization's efforts to amplify the Latino voice on issues affecting the Hispanic community, such as education, healthcare, immigration, civil rights, and the economy. Now, we draw our topic, our framing question, from Dr. King's speech, later book, Where Do We Go From Here? And the speech became a book published in 1967, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Dr. King spent a long time in Jamaica in isolation, producing this book, gathering his thoughts. I think this reminds us that before we can have the imagination to envision what is possible, we have to do the work of wrestling with ideas and getting clear about what's possible. And that's what we seek to do tonight. Dr. King's work has helped us to reflect on the terrible toll that racism and white supremacy take in our society, in our politics, in our institutions, and especially when we remember 2020, COVID-19 and its disparate effects. We remember the challenges in policing and violence, its disparate effects in communities of color. We also remember the awful white supremacist repression that we have seen. And we've also seen an attempted coup attempt just days ago. And so there is much to discuss, but we are clear that there is a possibility if we work hard enough and dream lovingly enough for something new to emerge in the midst of the ashes of all that we see. And so I want to begin our conversation tonight by directing a question to President Johnson. And President Johnson, Just a small question for you, sir. What does healing look like? What does racial healing look like in a nation with the history of the United States?
Thank you for the question. I want to thank the Advancement Project for organizing this conversation and all the panelists. Healing for me, it has a picture of accountability. In order for a nation to heal, in order for people to appreciate the opportunity of the future, you must hold accountable those who trespassed in ways in which it could have undermined this democracy. And that trespass was based on a white supremacist dogma that would demean human beings. And if we don't hold them accountable, it would open the door for other attempts. Our democracy is threatened by white supremacy and domestic terrorists. But if we can strengthen our democracy, that is the biggest threat to white supremacists and terrorists. And so for us to heal, we must have a sense of accountability.
Have we seen anything that approximates this healing in the history of this nation, President Johnson?
It's, I tell people, the person that's standing in between questions of inhumane activities and humanity, trying to compromise is the most dangerous person in the argument. Because there is no compromise when you have a set of individuals promoting inhumane treatment to other people. It is a leveling understanding before there is any question of healing or next steps. There has to be a recognition that we are equal and are endowed to certain inalienable rights under this Constitution. And even if you're not a citizen, you have the right to be treated with human dignity based on standards that should be provided to any citizens. And all of us are here as immigrants, with the exceptions of Native Americans who inhabited the land centuries before any of us even knew what it meant to be an immigrant.
President Fawn.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead, Janet, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Janet. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, again, it's wonderful to be with this distinguished panel and to try to start breaking all this down so that we can figure out how we can move forward. I would just say, for me, one example that I thought was striking, and we have not seen much of racial healing in this country, but I did think that one example was an effort to address one of the gravest injustices in American history, and that was the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. If we think about that, there may be some inspiration, some guidance for us, just as sort of an example. But as we saw, despite an egregious Supreme Court decision, the internment of Japanese Americans was clearly not justifiable under the national security grounds, and it was blatant racism. As a result, 120,000 Japanese Americans lost their businesses, homes, livelihoods, and freedom simply because of who they were and how they looked. But following World War II, if we look at history here, advocacy by Japanese American leaders and organizations led to a long overdue reckoning of this horrific policy. President Ford repealed the executive order that called for internment in 1976. A presidential commission issued a report in 1982 that concluded that the policy was based in racism and failure of leadership. And in 1988, Congress passed legislation that both gave the community a formal apology, which I think is essential, on behalf of the federal government, and allocated funds for reparations for survivors in those camps. I think that, again, it's not a complete response, but it is a good example of what is needed for racial healing: acknowledgement, investigation, documentation, accountability, as Derrick mentioned, apologies, and remedies and reparations. I do feel like we don't have very many examples, but that is one that we can draw some inspiration and guidance from. And I do think all of that is going to be necessary to put us on a path forward.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to add here,
Dlanis, please. Yes.
you know, I think part of this, and I'm happy to be here with you all. Thank you, Pastor Lamar, for joining
Oh,
me.
my pleasure.
That one of the keys to this is truth telling.
Mm.
And right now, we have a dearth of truth telling. We have been through 4 years of lies and misinformation that are coming directly from the top of this government. And, you know, just yesterday, right, on the birthday, the holiday of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, the Trump administration puts out its 1776 report. More lies, and also taking away from the truth about slavery and its core, the core part of the building of this country around the enslavement of people, the genocide of our Native brothers and sisters, right? Like all of that being soft pedaled and somewhat ignored is more lies, right? Then if we think about what this administration also did to take out racial sensitivity training and training around LGBTQ people in federal agencies, again, not allowing us to have the truth. And so I think that part of this healing process, and I think, Janet, to your point about Japanese internment, was that truth was at the start. And if we can't start to tell the truth, then we can't move beyond it. I'm not saying that I'm not hopeful, because I actually think that what we saw of all of our people coming together in the streets demanding that Black Lives Matter and the dignity and humanity of Black people be recognized is a moment of healing in which our white allies and other allies came together to say, yes, we understand what is happening. And I think that was a moment in which we started to have a breakthrough. But again, there's so much more that has to be done by a governmental agency.
Thank you. President Sharp, what might you say about racial healing, and if we have seen it before? We'd love to hear your perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you as well. I am so deeply honored to be here to join everyone on this panel. From our perspective, healing begins with us standing on a very solid foundation upon which this nation was built. We know this nation was built in a way that in law, in constitutions, in treaties, acknowledge that there is a fundamental principle of equity and equality upon which this nation was built. So we right now are completely unhinged from those laws, those policies, and those foundational documents upon which this nation was built. And I would take it a step further that we also have natural law. We all know that our Almighty Creator created us a certain way. These are inalienable rights. These are how our Almighty Creator made us. We are equal in the eyes of both the law in man and certainly our Almighty Creator. And so I think for us to go forward, we need to acknowledge that foundation. We need to acknowledge through truth telling. And I completely agree that for us to reconcile a country that is so deeply divided and unhinged from its foundation, we have to engage in a national exercise of truth and reconciliation. And that begins with equality. For tribal nations, we do not have political equality with the United States, as was contemplated in treaties. A country can take unilateral action to desecrate our sacred sites or punch a pipeline through the Dakotas and the Dakota Access Pipeline right now, constructing a wall across the Tana Odom with heavy equipment over the objection of the tribe. And so we want to achieve political equality, but our millions of citizens as well also experience racial inequality. Our young people every single day experience institutional racism in the classroom, on the ball fields. And so for us, we want to engage in a national conversation, a national truth telling to reconcile this country. And we need to be that generation that draws the line in the sand to say, no more beyond this. We have generation after generation, 400 years, 20 generations of marginalization and being unhinged from those principles. But I would also suggest that we have multi-generations of strength. And so that's what we need to draw upon to begin the healing process, because generation after generation, each one of our communities have stories of resilience, stories of honoring how we were created, stories of wanting to share in this national, the most amazing country on the planet. And so that's what I would see as the next step toward healing.
You all have raised excellent points, and I think it would be valuable, and you raised this, President Sharp, I'll start with you. You mentioned strength and telling the stories of those who have been resilient and who persevered. But for each of you, very briefly, what sustains you personally or organizationally? What sustains that vision for healing? What else would you add to what you said, President Sharp?
Yes, thank you for that question. And trust me, I ask myself that every single day, because as I mentioned in our pre-meeting, I had to evacuate citizens in an epic storm. We're facing sea level rise. And so every single day I have to ask myself, what am I going to look to towards strength? And I must suggest, as many who are probably watching and even on the panel here, the most beautiful dimension of our being is our spiritual strength. And for our community, while we've ceded millions of acres of land all across this country through treaties, we've never relinquished our spiritual connection to every inch of this country. And for generations, our ancestors prayed. They practiced their songs, their dance, their ceremonies. All of those prayers are echoing. And we stand on that, like every other community represented here. Your ancestors that have gone before you faced struggle, faced conflict, faced racism. And it was through prayer and love and healing and all those principles that Dr. King so beautifully led this country. That's the part of our being that is indestructible, and it's strong, and it's what binds us.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share what nourishes that hope, that vision for you, for your organization?
Well, I would just say, to build on Fawn's comments, that I think we all turn to our faith and look to that inner strength. But I will say that as much as we have been challenged, I think one of the takeaways from all of this that we've experienced, the darkness of these last 4 years, in particular under this most recent Trump administration, has been our resiliency. I mean, we have been tested, and as close as we came to seeing our democracy tested, we did see it survive. And we had a chance, I think, to understand more clearly, as I see Derrick and Judith and Fawn, I see what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. The NAACP has been around 100 years. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We have to be determined. We have to be resilient, and we can never give up hope that we can fight for our vision for that future. And so I do believe we have to look to that inner strength, but also understand that we have to be persistent, determined, and resilient in this effort to achieve that vision.
Excellent. Director Dianis, and then President Johnson, what's keeping you in this fight?
So what keeps me in this fight is Harriet Tubman and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Shirley Chisholm and Jacqueline Dianis, my daughter, and young people who are demanding something better, right? This Gen Z is not to be messed with. As they say, the last generation, they are unapologetic, and they're demanding that we all do better by them. And I love that, because it pushes us to the edge. It pushes us to be better, to dream bigger, to dream more radically, because we know that what we're in is not good enough. and that they know it's not good enough, and they're calling us on it. So they keep us honest.
That's excellent. President Johnson, we know you have a hard stop at 7:30, but please share with us what's nourishing you and your organization and the work.
People, real people who have lives, and biblically is that principle, who will speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And I can recall, I love telling Julie stories and to try to embarrass her, but this is a good story. I can recall, Julie, when we went to Jeff Davis County, and it was a set of parents in Mississippi, and the judge would sentence Black kids to manual labor for minor infractions. It was around 2003 to 2004, and we sat in that fellowship hall of the church. And just the fight you had with parents and that fierce urgency to protect their dignity, their children's dignity. That's what keeps me there. And in that moment, they just wanted someone to come in to help them take up the fight, not to fight for them, just to step in the breach, to explain and support. That's why I do this, because of people.
And President Johnson, you started off with accountability. You said accountability was key, but what are the other necessary conditions, the other necessary virtues that must be named or practiced to get us further along the healing process?
You know, there has to be a level of openness. Judy talked about truth. People accepting the truth. Facts actually matter. We have to level the playing field with what are the just facts that we can walk in the door and agree on. The worst thing that I've seen, particularly when it comes to African-American community and the white community, when you get to these tables, it hits this juncture where Black folks get mad and whites get defensive when you put the real truth on the table. And then everyone goes to their corner. There has to be a different type of openness where we can accept the reality of the harm and the injury. We can also accept the realities of the privilege and the access as a result, but we have to chart a course forward that we can all live with and is more equitable. What happened this summer is a unique moment in time where you've seen people taken to the streets, Black, white, old, young, Latino, Native Americans, male, female, in solidarity around a value proposition. Black Lives Matter, not a hashtag, not an organization, but a value proposition. Because in this country, we have neglected the lives of not only African Americans, but so many people, but it is exemplified by how we have been treated as a race of people. And that treatment isn't unique just to us outside of that. We have always been seen as readily available, cheap labor. And nothing we can do can rub the melanin off the skin. Nothing we can do can take away the brainwashing that has happened among working class whites to make them feel as if there's some level of skin privilege. There is very few who can be born in our community that can, quote, pass. Black Lives Matter is a value proposition that should permeate across all communities, because until we can hold that value proposition to be true under our social covenant, all of us are susceptible to be exploited and treated less than human.
President Johnson, we know you have to take your leave. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure there's no reason that you're busy in these days, but whatever you may be doing, we wish you well, and thank you for the work of the NAACP.
And thank you for telling a good story about me and not embarrassing me.
Oh, the time you almost ran me off the road?
Oh, come on, see? Goodbye, Derrick.
Yes, thank you. So President Sharp, to you, what else is necessary, do you think, for healing to progress?
Yes, I would suggest that what we need is multiple points of entry for the average everyday citizen to take positive, aggressive, and meaningful action towards racial equity and justice. I believe that there's an incredible synergy in this country. I believe there was a rude awakening for many people in 2020 who thought we dealt with the issue of racism in the 60s. They found themselves on the streets marching. And we see these movements. We see a rising of people who are disenfranchised, whether it's the 99 percenters, and there's always this to what end? What are we going to do? And so I think as leaders in every community, we need to work hard strategically together to figure out what are those points of entry for the average everyday citizen to step up to do something. We talk about truth, we talk about telling our story, and we talk about reconciling our current conditions today to those foundations. And that's something that I really believe that this next chapter of this country, we are prepared to have a national conversation. We have a president and administration that is prepared, that's making it a pillar of their leadership. And so we need to be prepared as community leaders, as local leaders, as national leaders, and I would even suggest as international leaders, because quite frankly, the entire world is paying attention to how we are going to find our way through this very dark chapter. And it is through bringing light to each and every community. So I would suggest, and that's something that I'm just really happy to be part of these conversations, because I think we can, rather than work in a silo in various places, we need to come together as a country to have more of these conversations, to create more opportunities and direct political action. And I thought, do we need new laws? And we have plenty of laws on the book. We have a constitution, we have state laws, we have court cases, we have all these things. We just need to live up to those standards and expectations individually and collectively.
President Murguía, how would you add to the question of the necessary conditions? What else are needful things?
Yeah, well, I think, you've seen already, folks have touched on some of them. I mean, one, acknowledgement, again, this effort to agree on the truth and understand that we have to tell the truth, as Judith has said. Accountability. I do think apologies and remedies and reparations, above all, I think that's why we've called as the collaborative, these partners here, on the incoming Biden-Harris administration to create a White House initiative on racial reckoning and racial reconciliation. I do think we need to take a good faith effort to look at this and understand we need to use this moment in our history where we have probably the greatest number of Americans ever in our history to recognize, tragically, because of George Floyd and his murder, but that recognize that systemic racism is a core challenge for our country and to move forward. And I think to undo centuries of discrimination, systemic racism, and the culture of white supremacy will also require reconciliation, unity, but more important, action by all Americans. I mean, communities of color can't do this alone. We need white allies, white Americans to recognize that responsibility also lies with them. What's the best way? And perhaps this White House office can help bridge communities that have been pitted against each other and recommend the best steps that we can take. I think we have to start by addressing the original sin of slavery. As we've said in our Latino community and the protests that we saw emerge this past summer, tu lucha es mi lucha. Your fight is our fight. And to understand that we have to be in this together. And I think from there, once we have that acknowledgement of that original sin, we can expand the conversation to include Latinos and others. That will also be necessary to create a completely just America, because I think it's important for us to recognize that there are dynamics even within our own communities of color that need to be reconciled too. But for Latinos in this country, we don't just empathize with the Black community, we identify with them. with our own history of bigotry, exclusion, and systemic inequality. And another dynamic is 25% of Latinos identify as Afro-Latino. We are connected in so many ways. We need to be committed to understanding that for us to have those steps in place, it's really important, but all these dynamics are important and we have to be in this together.
Director Dianis?
So I would add to the mix, and Janet actually talked about this, mentioned the idea of repair, right? So we have truth, we have recognizing our humanity, acknowledgement of the harm that was caused, and repair. You can't take the land of people, commit genocide against them, actually steal their children and put them into adoption, and say, okay, you're good. We apologize, you're good. You can't enslave people and keep them in bondage and as chattel, and then say one day, oh, you're free, and all you have is the clothes on your backs now. Good luck to you, right? You can't separate families and put children in cages and deport their parents and say they'll be adopted by somebody and say, it's okay, we apologize. So the repair has to come. You can't tell me that you can do this to a people and that they should just get over it. And so the repair part of making sure that people are whole, giving us our due in what should be the reparations to actually get us to where we need to be, to thriving, not surviving. You can't also put people in bondage in cages through an industry called mass incarceration because of some made-up drug problem that you decided that you had to take punishment instead of helping people, and destroy a whole community of people because their parents are in prison. And you have a prison industrial complex and you say, hey, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. You have destroyed a community, a culture, and a people. And so we have got to, in this country, repair, right? That's what happened with internment. There was some reparations, nowhere near enough, right? Jewish people had some reparations, right? But those of us whose humanity still has not been recognized, we have not been given our reparations, and it is time for that to happen.
Two things that come to mind. One, I've heard many thoughtful people when describing the very foundation of the American empire, the United States, that baked into it, and each of you have said this in your own way, is white supremacy, right? So it's like a cake, I've heard people say. A pound cake, which is my favorite. Pound of sugar, butter, eggs, sugar, vanilla extract. Once the cake is baked, you can't take the eggs out. Once the cake is baked, you can't take the flour or the sugar out. So that's one image. The other image is that when you consider this past year, I mean, we don't have to travel far, COVID-19, police and mob violence, disenfranchisement, new ways to suppress votes. Is this feasible? Can we really do this? Is it really feasible to create healing in the midst of a nation so built on this type of foundation of genocide, of exploitation? Just a straight down the middle question. Is this feasible? Can this be done?
I would say absolutely, because the foundation upon which this country is built and all those principles that we've talked about here are timeless. They transcend national boundaries and borders, and it's proven through the ages that just as the ugly and the evil that we see is very real, we have to look just to the many words of Dr. King, the other side of that, the light, the love, the unity, the strength, all of that is very real. And so I fully expect and hope that this generation is going to make significant strides, because we've seen the worst of the worst, and it's really stirred this country. It stirred the conscience. It stirred the heart of many people, and that's why I firmly believe that we are prepared as a generation. And I would also add that from our perspective, many of these challenges that we're witnessing today, whether it's COVID, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's climate change, whether it's racial injustice, from our perspective, our elders taught us there is a day of reckoning coming. It's not a question of if, but when. And I believe every one of these things are symptoms of a much deeper imbalance that began not just in 2020, not just a generation ago, but centuries ago. And so I know that this country is prepared. I believe in this country. I believe in every community that is represented here, that they too are equally committed. And so absolutely, it's possible.
Yeah.
President Murguía?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Director, go right ahead.
Judith, do you want to build
Go
on
ahead,
that?
Jen.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Jen.
I would just say, Pastor Lamar, you're absolutely right. I mean, we should not sugarcoat. I know you had a lot of sugar in your pound cake, but we should not sugarcoat. We should not sugarcoat this challenge. I mean, we have to recognize that we have before us an enormous challenge. I mean, gosh, the storming of the Capitol was one of the darkest days in our history. And it was not lost on those of us in the civil rights community that the insurrectionists were seeking to invalidate the votes of millions of Black and brown voters. And, to see the sight of Confederate flags march through our nation's Capitol building, our government has for too long turned a blind eye to that growing threat of white supremacist and white nationalist movements. And, also unsustainable is the, unchecked continuation of police brutality. And look, it was also not lost on anyone to see the double standard on display at the Capitol when we saw very little preparation or level of enforcement against white insurrectionists. Anybody on this call understands that if those had been Black and brown people, we wouldn't be talking about white, Black, or brown. We'd be talking about red, the blood that would have been shed by our people if that had been people of color. Let's be honest about that. It is a blatant double standard. Having said that, I'm gonna lean into Fawn. I'm gonna lean into you, Pastor. I mean, we also understand that, I'm going to say one word here: Georgia, Arizona. We are up against a lot, but who would have ever thought that we could have two senators from Georgia in the end make the difference in the shift of power, and one African-American minister headed to the Senate from Georgia? So we're up against a lot, but don't tell me we can't have hope, and that we can't, with the leadership of, frankly, women of color, and hail to Stacey Abrams, figure out how to get this done. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work, and even Stacey understands that this didn't happen overnight.
No.
In Arizona, we saw Arizona turn blue. It didn't happen overnight. It took a generation of those young people that Judith talked about, starting to work at the grassroots level and saying, this is our vision and we're not going to give up on it. So yes, we are up against enormous challenges, dark challenges, but I see light. And tomorrow the light's going to start to shine, and we're already going to see Reverend Warnock, and we'll be able to call him Senator Warnock.
Yes.
And that to me is amazing and something we have to hang on to.
Look, I have to say, President Sharp, I saw your ancestral dance was passed to Director Diana. She just had a little move there. So,
Yes.
And I will tell you this, Senator Reverend Warnock is going to love the filibuster rule because Black pastors do like to talk a lot. So he's going to love that. You know, that's right, Pastor. So, well, I mean, I do want to add this, that I think, Janet, to this last point, that while white supremacy has had a long ride, that the people who stormed the Capitol know that it's coming to an end. And they see it, right? They say that there's that saying that demographics is not destiny. Well, actually, it can be. And what we saw in this election cycle is a new destiny being created. We see a new America rising. We see a new majority rising. And so you can walk through the Capitol with your Confederate flag, and you can keep a hold of it. But at some point, you really are going to have to let it go. You have to let your monuments go. You have to, and so I think that and it may not happen in my lifetime, but I do know that we are on a different trajectory. And that's why we see the storming of the Capitol, because white supremacy is losing its cachet. It's losing its power. And so that's why I think that we are going to see a day where it's gone. We're seeing new people being elected, not only to Congress, but people at the legislative level. And our movements are stronger than they've ever been. Our movements to hold elected officials accountable and to elect people. And that turnout that we saw is not going to end here. We're going to see Texas go. You know that, Janet. That's going to be a big one. We're going to see Texas go. We're going to see Alabama and Louisiana, South Carolina. We got a lot of Black people in South Carolina. So things are going to change. It's just that it's, how long? Not long. Well, a little bit longer, right? So, but Pastor, I'm doing something bad here, you all. I'm going to ask Pastor a question. Because Pastor Lamar,
Yes.
I want to just acknowledge you and Metropolitan AME, because the folks do not know, your church was the site of a hate crime. And so a question to you, after having gone through that very recently, what do you think about racial healing? What do you think we should, what will it take for us to do that? Because I know that your congregation's been there for a long time and has been through a lot. And to have this recent hate crime in the midst of everything is painful.
Well, thank you for the question, Director Dianis. We have been in existence for almost 2 centuries, where we sit in Washington. President Sharp is 5-6 blocks from the White House. And the ancestors placed the church there to be a bulwark against the worst white supremacist impulses of the American empire, and to preach and embody the kind of message that says that all people are holy, all people are made in the image and likeness of God, all people should flourish. So for us, when the Black Lives Matter banner was vandalized and our church's property was breached, what I thought about and then wrote about subsequently was, we'll put our sign back up. That will be replaced, but we need to replace the white supremacist mythology and narrative that animates American politics, and it animates American capitalism. So you can't talk about capitalism without talking about what happened to your people's land. You can't talk about capitalism without talking about what happened to the land of our Latino brothers and sisters and their labor. You can't talk about it without talking about what happened to persons of African descent. So I am drawing strength from you all, because I'm thinking through some stuff now that, white supremacy is the CEO and racism is middle management, right? White supremacy is the potter and racism is the clay. So racism is a tool used by white supremacy to keep power and to make an excuse. These people are ignorant. These people are biologically inferior. These people are ontologically criminal, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. But what I hope to see is more of these kinds of conversations that say we can exist together. This is not a zero-sum game. If Black people can eat, you can eat too. Native people can have healthcare, you can too. The thing that I think animates us in a very dangerous way is a zero-sum scarcity model where we are thinking that there is not enough. There is more than enough money in this nation to take care of all of us. What we do not have is the political will, and what we do not have is the theological imagination that all of us are truly made in God's image and God's likeness. And if we keep pushing in that direction, something might change. Now I want to lift up two quotes.
You working on that Sunday sermon, I can see. With this CEO and the middle management.
It's kind of what we do. It's kind of what we do, right? So King's question, where do we go from here? And the book title is Where Do We Go From Here, Community or Chaos? He said in multiple ways, either we learn to live together as sisters and brothers, or we die together as fools, right? Those are the poles. And so he says two things. First, the line of progress is never straight. For a period of movement may follow a straight line, and then it encounters obstacles and the path bends. It is like curving around a mountain when you are approaching a city. Often it feels as though you're moving backwards and you lose sight of your goal, but in fact, you are moving ahead, and soon you will see the city again, close by. Now, you all have moved the conversation in the direction of hope. Tell me more about what you are seeing. So you talked about the election of a Black senator and a Jewish senator from Georgia, my home state. There are multiple Georgian Confederates breakdancing in their graves right now. Like, that was not supposed to happen. They built a system to keep that from happening, and another system was built for something new to emerge. What else are you seeing?
What I'm seeing, not only in 2020, but leading up to 2020. In fact, election night 2016, I came to realize that the real strength and power of this country does not lie in an office, an Oval Office on Pennsylvania Avenue, nor does the real power and strength of this country lie in Wall Street. But we've all witnessed how both of those systems have really corrupted our public space. But when we recognize the real power and strength of this country lies in the millions of American citizens that were demonstrated in Georgia, that was demonstrated in Arizona, and we come to know and understand the strength of us individually and the strength of us collectively, that's where the real power of this country lies. And so I look at the road ahead and the days ahead. This has been one awakening, and there are many people that are energized. There are many people that have been searching those deep places, those dark places, those light places. And so that's what gives me hope, knowing that the real power and strength of this country, time and time again, through those ebbs and flows, up the hill, down the hill, it lies in all of us collectively. And when we embrace those timeless principles upon which this great nation was built, we're going to continue to forge ahead. And I just believe this generation is ready to take those bold and aggressive steps forward in the aftermath of 2020.
President Murguía, what are you seeing?
You know, I tend to focus on the core messages that Dr. King taught us. I mean, I think they have stood the test of time and will continue to do that. So I think that, you know, if we want a more equal society where, you know, he reminded us we need to be judged by the content of our character, not by, you know, our race or national origin. And I do believe, and again, I mentioned Georgia, I'm hanging on to this. Dr. King understood that not only was nonviolence important, he asked us to pursue our goals through peaceful protest, but remember the ballot box, the ballot box, and the ballot box. He understood how important it would be for us to create change. And, you know, he was always challenged in so many ways, but he was forever an optimist.
Yes.
And reminding us again that arc of our moral justice is long, but it bends towards justice. So of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I mean, so I think those are important messages for us to hang on to in all of this. And I do believe that our work together, as Fawn has said, you know, the collective, the power in the people, with those messages of Dr. King that have stood the test of time, is a roadmap for us going forward. And I think we need to lean into what we have seen to be our truths. And I think that we can move forward if we stay as a collective focused on those key tenets that Dr. King taught us.
Director Dianis, tell me what your organization is doing to create the conditions for a new world, for a new way for us to order our lives as citizens in the United States. What are you all doing?
Dreaming about a different world and moving towards that. I mean, we are at Advancement Project. We are, you know, we're trying to make our ancestors' wildest dreams come true. We work with grassroots organizations across the country, and those young people that I was talking about earlier, who are thinking radically about the different kinds of systems that we have. And I would say that, you know, and we're also a multiracial organization because we understand the demographics and we understand that we all have to be in this work together. And that the issues that impact communities of color are often, you know, the same with some different, like, you know, tinge on it, right? And that it's underlined, it is what you said, white supremacy and racism, and then it may play out a little differently, but it's the same thing. And I would say the other thing that, you know, in this moment that gives me hope is that we have taken the Band-Aid off of, ripped the Band-Aid off of systemic racism. And we started to educate the public about this racism thing is not just an individualistic thing, but it's the systems, the institutions, the government, the policies, the practices. It's not the bad apples, but it's the whole institution of policing, for example, right? So we're having a very different conversation that opens us up to a different kind of remedy for what ails us. And so the idea that we could be talking differently about what safety means because people finally understand that the institution of policing has been a social control experiment over Black and brown bodies, right? And that now we also have a conversation because, in fact, what we have seen is that white supremacists exist in law enforcement, and they always did, but some people just figured that out yesterday on January 6th, rather. And so what we are seeing is an opportunity for us to recognize some of these systems changes that this multiracial democracy has got to deal with, and that we are going to be able to come together to make the kind of change that we need to make so that we can all be free.
Thank you. President Sharp, the organizations that you're working with, what are you all doing to give birth, to midwife what's possible in this place?
Yes, and thank you again for another excellent question. What we are doing, we are working toward envisioning our bright future and how our bright future is part of a national conversation. We are looking toward this administration. It was mentioned earlier, should one of the first objectives be an executive order on truth and reconciliation? How can we partner with our brothers and sisters across this country to elevate, amplify, and unleash that power and voice that is so not only desperately searching for answers, but our healing really requires that. And for me personally, as the president of 574 tribal nations, I know, understand, and recognize that this is a sacred moment. This is that day of reckoning. And we have to, in all humility, approach our positions of leadership and know that our Almighty Creator, more than any other lobbyist or our political operative that could create the conditions that 2020 delivered to us, we were working on changing our mascots in the aftermath of the outright murder of George Floyd. That fueled an effort that we've been working on for half a century. And it's those things. This is a divine moment in time, and we have to individually approach our positions with all humility, understanding that our conditions are much greater than even our generation, even greater than our communities, that we have to come together, and there is a light forward, there is a path forward, and it's filled with mercy and grace every single day, and we just have to embrace that and really pray for the future of this country every single day and come together.
President Sharp, in our tradition, I would say I feel the Holy Spirit like in a major way with what you just said. It's beautiful.
Oh.
President Murguía, what are you all doing? What's your organization?
Well, we work at the local level through our network of community-based organizations, almost 300 across the country.
Wow.
But we've had a long history of working across communities of color. So yes, many of our affiliates work to serve the Latino community, but we've worked in partnership at the national level to help address housing issues with the National Urban League. We've worked with NCAI to help in this effort to rid the mascots and the denigration of our Native American community. We've worked with the special needs communities on addressing issues that affect access to appropriate care for special needs people. So there is power in this coalition work. And I just really, this racial equity collaborative that has been put together by the Kellogg Foundation in many ways is the ideal messenger for this moment, because we are a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition that's committed toward a shared future, even as we acknowledge our diverse histories. And we have talked amongst ourselves, working cross-racially is not easy. I mean, it's important for us to acknowledge there is much that we have to learn from each other, and sometimes requires us to unlearn some things that all of us have taken for granted before. But it's also incredibly rewarding work. I know for us at Unidos US, research suggests that the Latino community, we've seen it in our polling, we've seen it, seeks solutions that work for everyone, not just for ourselves. And I think through this collaborative, we're able to understand that we can have advances for everyone when we're, again, working across as a collective. So for us, getting at the heart of what we can do to, in particular, acknowledge this moment to achieve equity for everyone and to address systemic inequalities. That is going to be, I think, our goal as we come together in this moment. And I think the more we can work in coalition, the more success we're going to have. But we're proud of the work that we've led for over 50 years to address those systemic inequalities, certainly as we've seen them in the Latino community. But I'm hopeful that we can work together to do it for everyone.
I just
And
want to thank.
I could just add, can I just add a quick second, Pastor? The other piece of this, and I think this gets to your point, Pastor, about the issue of scarcity, right? So when we are operating, for example, as this collaborative, this multiracial collaborative, what we are doing is we're stepping outside of it's me versus you, right? It is all of us, right? And so how can we start to look for the kinds of solutions that don't pit us against each other, that don't benefit you, but then put my people in cages, then don't, all of these kinds of things that are the policies that could just easily, we could all just say, okay, let's just worry about ourselves. So I think that that's important. And I just wanted to add, for some of the work at Advancement Project, like we are, really digging in on the policing issues. And we are also, voting access has been our thing, because we know that this multiracial democracy needs to have access to the ballot. So our voting rights work is so important, because people may not know that, like, we saw this record turnout. And when we see record turnout, the first thing that happens in state legislatures is that they run on in and try to restrict the vote. And so in Georgia, you know they are going after it. So they want to get rid of mail-in ballots, all these drop boxes, all the ways in which we made voting easier through litigation and advocacy. They want to take that back because they know that when we make voting easier, our people turn out and they vote. And so those efforts are always, this is the thing that we've got to know about this work, is that this work that we do is a push and pull. And so one day we're pushing, the next day we're pulling, and then we're back to pushing, right? Because the white supremacists are not going to give up very quickly. So that's the kind of work that we have to continue. And I think it's important for folks to keep engaging, right? Like, we do our work, people voted, but we can't just vote and walk away. Right now, we got to hold people accountable. Even the people that we voted for, we have to hold them accountable. They have to hear from us all the time. They have to know that we're there, and we have to keep organizing.
So I have a request of you, and that for each of you, I know that your organizations are amplifying a lot of messages. So in one sentence, if you could amplify one message and it would reach every citizen in this nation, what would that one sentence message be that you would want amplified?
I would amplify and elevate a message that was delivered to a recent gathering of ours from an elder from Alaska. And she implored the young people in every generation to simply love one another, that we've been through so much as a country, so much with COVID, so much with everything leading up to 2020, that right now, the most important thing we could do is to demonstrate through acts, through words, through kindness. And I think that's reflective of what Dr. King said. I'm tired of hatred. It's too heavy. Let's just love one another.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, to me, I think of the sayings of my own parents, and you know, there is, in the Latino community, there's a saying, echar pa'lante. It means we have to keep moving forward. You know, never in our history do you read about us saying, oh, the white flag, we get, never, never. You know, we can never give up hope that we can have that vision that we dream of, and to keep those dreams very big for our families, for our communities, for our country, for the world. So to me, it's about moving forward, keep working toward that bigger vision, that very inclusive vision for all of us.
Do I get a semicolon and then some dashes and ellipses? No, I'm just kidding.
It's your house. It's your house.
No, so mine is similar to Janet, is that freedom is coming if we keep working.
It's beautiful. So you all mentioned, and just jump in, because I think I've been involved with some multiracial coalitions, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we think about the fusion kind of political movement that we hear Dr. Barber and others talking about, how that is what will get us where we're trying to go. But why do you think multiracial coalition is necessary for this? I firmly believe that, but why do you all, you're on the front lines, why do you think that it's necessary? You can't do this in silos.
Yes, I think our national story from European contact through each and every generation is very powerful. And when you begin with the millions of our ancestors through acts of genocide, that blood still is a stain on this country. And then the next era of slavery and the Japanese internment camps and the Latino community, every single chapter. And I would even go as far as saying even more recently with the disenfranchisement of the average American citizen, who believes that while they could experience and share empathy with a little girl who cannot even get on a bus, a public bus, they now feel that disenfranchisement. And so every generation, and it's important for us to tell that story. Our elders talk to us about telling our story, and generation after generation, there's an era that is unhinged from those basic principles. And only through telling that story from the very beginning, through each and every chapter, can we begin to heal as a nation. And leaving out any one part of it is an incomplete picture and falls short of national healing and reclaiming the soul of this nation. So that's why we need to consider every single disenfranchised person in this country.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that, look, our histories are different, but we have our common humanity, and we need to draw on that. But, I think whether it's genocide or slavery, for us in the Latino community, our history of how Latinos, through the acquisition of the American Southwest or Puerto Rico, involves conquest. I mean, we all have different histories, but we come together with this common vision. I think of the note, the letter that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote to Cesar Chavez when Cesar Chavez was fasting. And this was in 1967. He said, our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for humanity. There is power in our coming together and in that common understanding, and leveraging that power for the common good is something that's just undeniable. And we have to keep working at it.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add other than we can think about this as our linked fate or our linked destiny, depending on if you see the glass half full or half empty. But we are in this experiment together. And so we have got to be thinking about and getting out of the individual and getting to the collective, right? When I think about COVID-19 and how hard it has impacted communities of color, all of our communities of color. And I think about the people who won't wear masks because they're thinking individual freedom, not collective freedom and health, right? And so we need to be thinking in the collective because that's what's going to save our people, right? And so that's a different mindset than my community versus your community, and as they say, kind of like the oppression Olympics, right? We don't need to have that. We know we all suffered under the greatness of white supremacy, and so I think this is a time for us to be thinking, and because again the demographics are shifting in this country, and so we need to be thinking about the beauty of this multiracial experiment and what it holds for us and what we can build together that white supremacy will disdain, right? We want white supremacy to hate what we are getting ready to do as a multiracial democracy.
So King has another quote that I'd like to lift up as we prepare to end this really invigorating conversation. He writes in Where Do We Go From Here, Community, Chaos or Community, whites, it must be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn. Now he's writing this, of course, in 1967, and I think it was President Murguía who raised the fact that white people have work to do. And there are many white brothers and sisters who are allies, but share with me your perspective on what King is saying. We place so many burdens on communities of color to fix this issue. What is the responsibility of our white sisters and brothers?
So I'm going to jump in here first, shake it up a little. So, I think that what we saw this summer with white allies taking to the streets, demanding justice for those who've been killed by the police, and demanding Black Lives Matter, was a moment in which we saw our white brothers and sisters recognizing that there's something wrong and I can't be complicit, right? Like now is not a moment to sit on the sidelines. And so that, I think, is an opening, right, to a conversation and an opening to work. And I'm one of those people that will tell you that I can't be in another room where I tell white people how it feels to be Black and to be a victim of discrimination and to, worry about the police. I can't do that. That's a lot of extra work, right? And so I do think this is a time where the truth-telling piece that I talked about before has got to connect to white folks so that they can do the hard work of understanding and appreciating and accepting the harm that has been done. But that will take them actually doing the work themselves.
Mm. President Sharp, President Murguía, your thoughts? Your sound is gone, President Sharp.
Yes,
okay.
Can you hear me?
Got you now.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Dr. King, in a couple of his speeches explicitly mentioned Native Americans. And in one of those, he talked about the importance of this country to get its history straight. He said the genocide of this country and the westward expansion is taught as something that was noble. That crusade was something that's uplifted, and it's a noble thing, and it's celebrated in stories, in film, and folklore. And so he put that burden back squarely on this country to know and understand that history and to get it right. And because generation after generation is perpetuated, it's fueled, and there is no willingness to feel any sense of remorse about the foundation of this country, or even acknowledging it. That is something that I'm positive if Dr. King were alive today, he would continue to advocate for our interest and challenge the majority to take a hard look at that history. And so that is something that it goes back to the truth telling. That has to be foundational to our work going forward. And it is squarely on every citizen in this country to know their history, and through teaching our kids. And the flip side of that, I often worry about as kids are witnessing what's happening, their parents, their grandparents, there's a whole nother generation of young people being taught to hate. And so we cannot let that blind spot continue in generation after generation, reaching down to the youngest to teach them the good things in life. So that's what I would put back on the white community, the white citizenry of this country.
Thank you. President Murguía.
Yeah, I would just say, in an ideal world, the white community would be leading the way, recognizing how much they have benefited from the systemic inequalities, and also that the white Americans continue to dominate so much of the leadership in every sector and virtually every institution still in this country. But I also think it's true that we don't live in that ideal world. I mean, we just don't. And so we're going to have to do more than our part. That's just the way it's going to have to be. I mean, we're going to have to bring folks along. And I do think that it's going to require us to always, again, provide more of that leadership because, we may not have any other choice if we want to see progress in this. And you're right. Not only do we have to help lead this effort, but we have to be strategic in how we do it. I think about, building the bridge across these communities as we're fighting for our own equality and justice.
Yes.
We have to be careful that we don't alienate others further away from what we see at the center of that for everyone. So yes, we have to keep doing it, and we have to actually do it in a way where we're not pushing folks further apart, where we're actually thinking about how we can find that common ground where folks can everyone can feel like they can be part of this shared sense of responsibility, the shared sense of our future vision. You know, we're just not in that ideal world yet. I do think we can see, and again, what Judith has talked about in Fawn, we have seen a lot more folks step up in different generations and in different races and ethnicities. And I do believe that we're going to continue to see more progress, but it doesn't mean that we can defer on who's going to lead on this. We are going to lead because we understand that diversity is a strength for this country. And we will make that diversity something that we can all embrace. I think we just have no choice.
This has been, for me, exhilarating to be in the presence of such powerful women doing amazing things. And I want to thank President Derrick for his attendance earlier and his contribution. I was reading something from the poet Seamus Heaney, and he talked about the fact that we exist between our murderous past and the marvelous world we can create together. Mm-hmm. So I just really appreciated that.
Yes.
Our past is murderous. And we dare not overlook that. But what we can create together is marvelous.
Yes.
To give the last words to these excellent philosophers I grew up listening to on my parents' floor model television / 8-track / turntable. The great philosophers, Frankie, Beverly, and Mays. We are one. We are one. And thank you all. Yes. Erica, Advancement Project, did you all want to share anything?
Thank you.
Fade to black. All right, we're good. Thank you all very much for your
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the energy in the chat. God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you.